Good afternoon. Thanks for you participating in the crop conversation. First, I would like to introduce the distinguished guests. Mr. Al-Haji, the acting president of Natural Cassava Processor and Market Association of Nigeria. Welcome. Professor Andrew, the director of National Resource Institute, University of Greenwich. Welcome. Okay. Mr. Jonathan. Sorry. Mr. Jonathan is the Agriculture and Rural Development Economist, International Center for Tropical Agriculture. Welcome. Mr. Brad, from the ingredient, is the very famous the grain processor in the world, most famous one. Okay. Okay, today the topic is about the adding value for the roots and tuber crops, the processing and the value chains. When we talk about the value, always related with the fortune. Unfortunately, the cassava, the tubes crops always related with the poor. So still with the poor hat. So how can we find a solution? Try to throw the poor hat away, becomes rich. So we try to find the solution. I hope the guests, you can get some solution to everybody. Is it possible to throw the poor hat away? So the first question I would like to ask Mr. Andrew to answer the question. The first question is, what are the key challenges to be addressed in linking farmers with root and tuber markets, which might not affect other crops?
Well, thank you very much. I think it's very important to point out when we start that roots and tuber crops are very important to poor people, as you said. And the real challenge is how do we get them into those markets that are growing, that provide new opportunities to improve their incomes and improve their livelihoods. Root crops are so important largely because of their agronomic strengths. You know, the fact that cassava will resist drought, that it's flexible in harvesting and planting, all make the difference to a smallholder farmer. The fact you have sweet potato that delivers a good crop in a short amount of time, again, makes that difference. If I was to answer your question very directly and in one word, I would say the answer is perishability. Because it's the short shelf life, particularly of cassava, that is a major challenge compared to other crops with which it competes. So if you think about perishability, I think we've got to think about it in three different ways. The first way is the actual physical losses that we have, which may be only sort of 3 to 25%, maybe not as high as we previously thought. But probably as important, or even more important, are the economic losses, the discounting that you get because people know it's perishable. So when it gets towards the end of its shelf life, people then reduce the value. And the third factor, I think, is the limitation that there is to processing. The fact that you never have long distances between where it's produced and where it's sold because you have this perishability that you have to deal with. In the case of yams, you get very large losses associated with storage. And how you can overcome some of those, and I know I mentioned some of those in my presentation on Monday related to work at the Natural Resources Institute, trying to overcome the problems of weight loss and sprouting. So you have the perishability. How do you overcome it? The usual way of overcoming it is that processing systems have developed. Processing systems mainly for traditional products. And those are very important in the livelihoods of women, because it's often bringing income into the household, that's being used for food, that's really benefiting the family. But I think there's issues there in terms of quality of products and scale. So often, with case of cassava, big pieces of cassava are dried over a 2-week period. You may have issues of mycotoxins and things like that. So I think to scale up there, we've got to address some of these quality and scale issues. I know from the work that we've been doing, you ask a farmer, what are your major constraints? And they say, not enough market for what I'm producing. So the ability to access new markets, I think, then becomes very important. And the new markets that we've been working on is things like high quality cassava flour, beyond that there's starch and ethanol. The issue then becomes, how do you link those smallholder farmers into those growing markets? So you've got to establish the market and link smallholder farmers into it. So just my final comment therefore relates around those new markets and some of the challenges to think about. I think we've got to think about the overall policy context in which people are working. It needs to be a stable policy context and one that's supportive. I also think that we need to have the right technologies in place at the right scale in the right location. It's no good, immediately jumping in with a massive starch factory requiring a large starch supply chain from a smallholder base that's not ready at that time to provide it. I think we've got to go through the right steps to get through development to be in the right place. So there you go. That's what I would share with you as a first set of thoughts around your question about the key challenges for roots and tuber crops that are different to other crops. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's very, very good answer. Let me do agree with my summary. Is make the benefit from the difference, because the cassava is different from other crops, so it's different. Size, just now you talk about the small size, is good for the small farmers. So it's different with corn. Corn always with large industry, right? So we should think about make the benefit from different.
Yeah, I think the big difference is that potential benefit that you can bring to smallholder farmers. And that is a huge difference to many other commodities, and let's not forget that. I think that's why certainly I'm committed to working on these crops. It's not necessarily at the industrial end. That's clearly needs to be there. But for me, it's the development context in which we're working and the benefit to smallholder farmers. But at that other end, we shouldn't forget actually some of the advantages of cassava. Cassava starch has good functional properties. It's a very clean starch. There's not a lot of protein there. So there are advantages with it as a crop for industrial use. But to me, the most important thing is that linkage back to smallholder farmers and how we make that work.
Thank you.